This is a bad sound for oyster growers, a sound of dead oysters and lost money. This echoing sound of empty oyster shells comes from mortality events like this. In recent years, spikes of mortality in the spring and summer have made this sound too common on commercial farms in Virginia. Typically, death leaves a trace, a corpse riddled with clues. Oysters, on the other hand, often leave nothing but an empty shell and their cause of death a mystery. The only clues, therefore, may come from the survivors. Why didn't these oysters die? What's different about them? There are likely many ways in which these oysters differ from another, but given the timing of these mortalities, it may be all about sex. In the summer, it is not unusual to see a wild oyster look like this, full of veiny structures containing millions of eggs or sperm. To get to this point, an oyster spends the spring sexually developing. One way to think of this development is like the growth of a tree. In early spring, when the water is cold, the sexual organ is little more than a stump. As the water warms, the branches, or follicles, grow, and from the follicles, the leaves develop, like the eggs or sperm. Most oysters farmed in Virginia, however, have been designed to be sterile, and thus should remain sexually dormant throughout the spring. This, however, is often not the case. Often these sterile oysters sexually develop, but with less branches and fewer leaves. Sometimes these oysters even develop much like wild oysters, producing many branches and many eggs or sperm. Perhaps most peculiar, we've even seen these oysters fully develop follicles, but no eggs or sperm. These patterns of sexual development may be our best clue in understanding these spring mortalities. Over the last year, we've been visiting several commercial farms monthly to monitor survival and collect live oyster samples. Back in the lab, our primary focus is to take a look inside the oysters to assess their sexual development. To do so, we undergo multiple steps to process the oysters, including dissection, chemical treatment, and staining. With data from live oysters throughout the year, we can determine how the proportions of these sexual patterns change during mortality events, telling us what's different about the survivors. Figuring out why spring mortalities can happen on Virginia farms is important to keeping the oyster aquaculture industry in Virginia thriving. This project, funded by Virginia Sea Grant, Virginia Institute of Marine Science, and the Aquaculture Genetics and Breeding Technology Center, aims to ensure oyster aquaculture in Virginia remains an economically viable and growing industry.